A farmer's wife feeds a homeless man her last meal, but the next morning, FBI agents knock on her door with shocking news. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The autumn wind whistled through the cracks in the farmhouse windows, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Martha Sullivan pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her thin frame and gazed out at the barren fields that stretched toward the horizon. The farm that had been in her husband's family for 4 generations was dying, just like everything else in her life. 6 months ago, Robert had clutched his chest while fixing the tractor and collapsed among the cornstalks. By the time Martha found him, his eyes were fixed on the endless blue sky, unseeing. The heart attack had been swift and merciless, leaving her alone with a mountain of medical bills, a mortgage she couldn't pay, and a farm she couldn't maintain. Martha wiped away a tear with a calloused hand. At 57, she had never imagined she would end up like this, widowed, broke, and facing foreclosure. The bank had given her 30 days' notice last week. In 4 weeks, she would lose everything. She moved to the kitchen, her steps heavy. Opening the refrigerator, she took inventory of what remained: half a loaf of homemade bread, a small chunk of cheese, 3 eggs, and some milk that would spoil soon. The pantry wasn't much better: a few cans of vegetables, some flour, sugar, and a jar of homemade strawberry preserves from last summer's harvest. Martha sighed. The Social Security check wouldn't arrive for another week, and she had exactly $13.42 in her checking account. She had been rationing what food remained, eating just enough to keep her strength up while she packed up the memories of 40 years of marriage. She took out the eggs and the last of the milk. Tonight, she would allow herself a proper meal: a small omelet with cheese and the remaining slice of her homemade bread. Tomorrow she would figure out how to stretch what was left until the check came. As she whisked the eggs, the sound of rain began to patter against the roof. The light drizzle quickly transformed into a downpour, drumming against the tin roof with an intensity that made conversation impossible. Martha was grateful for the noise. It drowned out the thoughts that had been tormenting her for months. What would become of her? Where would she go? At her age, who would hire her? A sudden knock at the door startled her from her reverie. Martha frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the farm was a good mile from the main road. The neighbors rarely visited, especially not in weather like this. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Martha wiped her hands on a dishcloth and made her way to the front door. Through the rain-streaked window, she could make out the silhouette of a man, his shoulders hunched against the storm. Caution made her call out before opening the door. "Who is it?" "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," came a deep voice, strained with exhaustion. "My car broke down about a mile back. I saw your lights. Just wondering if I could use your phone to call for help." Martha hesitated. Robert had always been the trusting one, willing to help strangers without question. She had been more cautious, but he'd often teased her about her wariness. "Not everyone's out to get you, Marty," he'd say with that crooked smile she missed so desperately. With a silent apology to her more cautious self, Martha unlatched the door and opened it a crack. The man on her porch was soaked to the skin, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He was tall and gaunt, with several days' worth of stubble on his hollow cheeks. His clothes, a threadbare coat over a flannel shirt and jeans, were sodden and mud-splattered. But it was his eyes that caught Martha's attention, deep brown and filled with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Phone's in the kitchen," she said, opening the door wider. "You're drenched. Come in before you catch your death." "Thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate it." He stepped inside, careful to wipe his boots on the mat, though they were so soaked it hardly made a difference. "I'm Martha Sullivan," she said, leading him to the kitchen where the small rotary phone hung on the wall. John Reeves," he replied, extending a hand before thinking better of it and pulling it back with an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I'm dripping all over your floor." "Don't worry about that," Martha said, suddenly aware of how desperately thin the man was. His cheekbones protruded sharply, and his wrists were like twigs extending from his coat sleeves. Without thinking, she gestured to the kitchen table. "Why don't you sit down? I was just making some dinner. You look like you could use a hot meal." Something flickered in John's eyes, surprise, gratitude, and something else Martha couldn't quite name. "I don't want to impose. Just the phone is fine." "Nonsense, it's no imposition. I always make too much anyway." The lie came easily. "You call whoever you need to, and I'll fix you a plate." While John made his call, Martha divided the whisked eggs into 2 portions and added a little water to stretch them further. She sliced the bread and cheese thinner than she'd planned. It wouldn't be much of a meal for either of them, but at least it would be warm. She couldn't help but overhear his conversation. "Yeah, it's me." "No, the car finally died. About a mile east of Wilson Creek." I know. No, don't worry about it tonight. It's pouring, and I found a place to wait out the storm." "No, I'll figure it out tomorrow." "Yeah, I will, thanks." He hung up the phone and turned to find Martha setting 2 plates on the table. "Your friend coming to get you?" she asked. John shook his head. "Not tonight. He lives about 40 miles from here, and with this weather—" He trailed off, looking at the plate of food with poorly disguised hunger. "I really can't take your food, ma'am." "Sit," Martha said firmly, channeling the tone she'd used with stubborn farmhands over the years. "It's just a simple omelet, and it'll get cold if you keep arguing." John sat, and after Martha nodded encouragement, he took a bite. The way he closed his eyes, savoring the simple food as if it were a gourmet meal, told Martha everything she needed to know. This man hadn't eaten in days. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the rain providing a steady backdrop to the quiet clink of forks against plates. Martha found herself studying her unexpected guest. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was an intelligence in his eyes and a certain dignity in the way he held himself. This wasn't a man who had always lived rough. "You're not really having car trouble, are you?" Martha said finally, surprising herself with her directness. John's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, meeting her gaze with a frankness that was both startling and refreshing. "No, ma'am, I'm not," he admitted. "I've been walking for about 2 days now. I saw your farm and was going to ask if you had any work, but then the storm hit and He gestured vaguely. "I'm sorry for lying." Martha nodded, appreciating his honesty. "Where are you headed?" "Anywhere that'll have me. I had a job in construction up in Fairfield, but the company went bust. Lost my apartment when I couldn't make rent. Been moving around, picking up odd jobs where I can." He looked down at his plate, embarrassment coloring his features. "Never thought I'd end up like this. I have a degree in engineering, you know. Used to have a good job, a house, a family. Life has a way of pulling the rug out from under us," Martha said softly, thinking of Robert, of the farm, of everything she was about to lose. John looked up, really seeing her for the first time. His gaze traveled around the kitchen, noting the empty counters, the ancient appliances, the single light bulb that illuminated the room. "You're having a rough time too, aren't you?" Martha was surprised to find tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't spoken about her situation to anyone, not even her sister in Omaha who had offered her a spare room. "Pride," Robert would have said. "Stubbornness." "My husband died 6 months ago," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Heart attack. We were already struggling with the farm and the medical bills." She shook her head. "The bank's foreclosing in a month." John's expression softened. "I'm so sorry. And here I am, eating your food." "Don't," Martha interrupted. "It's nice to have company. And the food would have gone to waste anyway." Another small lie, but one that preserved both their dignities. Outside, lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out, plunging the kitchen into darkness. "Well," Martha said with a forced lightness, "looks like we're in for a proper storm." She stood and fumbled in the drawer for candles, her hands finding the familiar shapes by memory. The match flared, casting a warm glow over the kitchen as she lit 3 stubby candles. "You can't go back out in that," she said, setting the candles on the table. "The barn's dry, at least in the loft. There's some old blankets out there. It's not much, but it's better than being in the storm." John looked at her with those tired eyes, now reflecting the candlelight. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be anyone." Martha considered the question. "My husband would have done the same," she said finally. "And maybe I just needed to remember that there's still kindness in the world, that we're all just people trying to get by." The candlelight cast long shadows as they finished their modest meal, 2 strangers bound by circumstance and shared hardship, unaware that this simple act of human kindness would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. For in the morning, it wouldn't be John's friend who would arrive at Martha Sullivan's door, but 2 FBI agents with questions about the man to whom she had given her last meal. Martha woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a washed-clean sky of brilliant blue. For a moment she lay still, listening to the familiar creaks of the old farmhouse, before remembering her visitor. She dressed quickly in faded jeans and one of Robert's old flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him. In the kitchen, she hesitated before the nearly empty refrigerator. There was barely enough for 1 person's breakfast, let alone 2. Still, she couldn't send John away hungry. The back door creaked open before she could decide, and John entered, his clothes still damp but less bedraggled than the night before. "Morning," he said, awkwardly hovering in the doorway. I fixed that loose step on your back porch, and I got the pump in your well working better. It was just a loose coupling." Martha blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that. Least I could do, for the meal and the shelter." He glanced at the table, then back at her. "I should be moving on. Don't want to be a burden." Martha found herself reluctant to see him go. There was something about John Reeves that tugged at her. Not just sympathy for his situation, but a sense that beneath the hardship was a good man. "You could stay for breakfast," she offered. "It's not much, but—" A sharp knock at the front door interrupted her. Martha frowned. 2 visitors in less than 24 hours was unusual for her isolated farm. "Expecting someone?" John asked, his body suddenly tense. "No," Martha said, moving toward the front of the house. Through the window she could see a black SUV parked in her driveway. 2 men in dark suits stood on her porch, their expressions serious. Something cold settled in Martha's stomach. "Stay here," she whispered to John, who had followed her to the living room. He nodded, shrinking back into the kitchen. Martha opened the door, forcing a smile. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Mrs. Sullivan?" the taller of the 2 asked. He was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Wilson. This is Special Agent David Chen. We're with the FBI." They showed their badges, which Martha examined carefully. "FBI? What's this about?" "May we come in, ma'am?" Agent Chen asked. He was younger, with an earnest face that would have seemed friendly in any other context. Martha hesitated, then stepped aside. As the agents entered, she caught a glimpse of a 3rd man in the SUV, watching the house intently. "Mrs. Sullivan," Agent Wilson began once they were seated in her faded living room, "we're looking for a man named Jonathan Harker. We have reason to believe he might have passed through this area." Martha kept her expression neutral, though her heart had begun to race. "I don't know anyone by that name." "He's approximately 6 feet tall, mid-40s, dark hair," Agent Chen continued, watching her face carefully. He may have identified himself using a different name. Martha thought of John in her kitchen. John Reeves, he'd called himself. Not Jonathan Harker. But how many aliases might a man on the run use? "What has this man done?" she asked, buying time. The agents exchanged glances. "I'm afraid we can't share specifics of an ongoing investigation," Agent Wilson said. "But it's a matter of national security. If you've seen or spoken to anyone matching that description, it's imperative that you tell us." Martha's mind raced. National security? The thin, hungry man who'd fixed her porch step and well pumped didn't seem like a threat to anyone. But then, what did she really know about him? "I haven't seen anyone like that," she said, the lie coming more easily than she expected. "I don't get many visitors out here, especially not since my husband passed." Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. "We're sorry for your loss, ma'am. But if you do see this man, please don't approach him. He's considered dangerous. Call this number immediately." He handed her a business card. Martha nodded, taking the card. "Of course. Do you mind if we take a look around your property?" Agent Wilson asked. "Standard procedure." Before Martha could respond, the back door slammed. All three heads turned toward the sound. "Is someone else here, Mrs. Sullivan?" Agent Wilson's hand moved toward his jacket. Martha's mind went blank. Just the wind. That door never latches properly." The agents were already moving toward the kitchen, Martha trailing behind helplessly. The room was empty, the back door ajar. Through the window, she could see John running across the field toward the tree line. "There he is!" Agent Chen shouted, both men drawing their weapons as they rushed out the door. "Wait!" Martha called after them. "He's not dangerous. He's just a homeless man who needed shelter from the storm." But the agents were already sprinting after John, who had nearly reached the trees. The third agent had emerged from the SUV and was circling around to cut off John's escape route. Martha watched in horror as John disappeared into the woods, the agents in pursuit. She stood frozen on her back porch, the morning sun suddenly feeling cold on her skin. What had she done? Had she harbored a criminal, a threat to national security? Or had she just betrayed an innocent man who was already down on his luck? 10 minutes later, Agent Wilson returned alone, breathing hard from the chase. "He got away," he said grimly. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to tell me everything he said to you." Inside, seated once more in her living room, Martha told them a carefully edited version of the truth. Yes, a man had come to her door during the storm. He'd claimed his car had broken down. She'd let him use the phone and offered him shelter in the barn because of the weather. No, he hadn't told her much about himself. Yes, he'd called himself John Reeves. "Did he mention where he was headed?" Agent Chen asked, scribbling notes. Martha shook her head. "Just that he was looking for work. He'd lost his construction job in Fairfield." "Did he have a backpack or bag with him? Any kind of case or container?" "No," Martha said. "Just the clothes on his back." Agent Wilson leaned forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you were just being kind to someone you thought needed help. But this man is not who he claims to be. He's involved in a serious situation that could have far-reaching consequences." "What kind of situation?" Martha demanded. "If you want my help, I deserve to know what's going on." The agents exchanged glances again. Finally, Agent Wilson sighed. Jonathan Harker was a senior systems analyst for a defense contractor. 3 weeks ago, he disappeared with highly classified information. We believe he's planning to sell it to foreign interests. Martha couldn't reconcile this description with the man who had shared her table last night. There must be some mistake. The man I met was destitute, hungry. He didn't even have a change of clothes, let alone classified documents. That could be part of his cover, Agent Chen suggested. The best way to disappear is to become invisible. What better disguise than a homeless drifter? Martha said nothing, uncertainty gnawing at her. John had been so genuine, so thankful for the simple kindness she'd shown him. Had it all been an act? "We'll need to station agents here," Wilson continued. "There's a chance he might return, especially if he left anything hidden on your property." "Is that really necessary?" Martha asked, alarmed at the thought of strangers invading her home. "I'm afraid so, ma'am. This is a matter of national security." After the agents had searched her house and barn, finding nothing, and set up their surveillance, Martha retreated to her bedroom. Through the window, she could see agents combing the fields, others setting up equipment in and around their vehicles. Her peaceful farm had become a base of operations for an FBI manhunt. She sat heavily on the edge of her bed, Robert's photograph staring back at her from the nightstand. "What have I gotten myself into, Bob?" she whispered. "And what kind of man did I really let into our home?" As the day wore on, more agents arrived. They searched every inch of her property, questioned her repeatedly, and established roadblocks on the surrounding roads. Martha watched it all with a growing sense of unreality. By evening, Agent Wilson informed her they would be maintaining surveillance overnight. "We'll try to be as unintrusive as possible," he assured her, though Martha found nothing unintrusive about the floodlights now illuminating her barn and fields, or the agents patrolling her property with flashlights and dogs. After a dinner she barely touched, provided by the FBI since her own supplies were exhausted, Martha stood at her kitchen window. The last 24 hours had transformed her quiet world. Yesterday, her biggest concern had been how to say goodbye to the farm. Now, she was caught in the middle of what the agents kept calling a matter of national security. As darkness fell completely, Martha found herself hoping that John, or Jonathan, or whoever he really was, had gotten far away. Because despite the agent's warnings and her own doubts, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man who had sat at her table, grateful for a simple meal, was not the traitor they described. In the distance, a dog barked, followed by shouts from the agents. Martha's heart leapt to her throat. Had they found him? And if they had, what would happen next? The commotion outside died down almost as quickly as it had started. Martha pressed her face against the window, straining to see what was happening in the darkness beyond the floodlights. 2 agents were returning from the tree line, one of them holding back an excited German shepherd. She held her breath, scanning for any sign that they had captured John, but there was no one else with them. A soft knock at her back door made her jump. Agent Chen stood there, his expression apologetic. "False alarm, Mrs. Sullivan," he said when she opened the door. "Dog caught the scent of a raccoon. Sorry for the disturbance." Martha nodded, hoping her relief wasn't visible. "It's fine. I wasn't sleeping anyway." Chen hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You should know, ma'am, that we've got the entire area locked down. Roadblocks on every exit, agents in all the surrounding towns. If Harker's still in the area, we'll find him." "And when you do?" Martha asked. "What happens to him then?" Something flickered across Chen's face. Doubt, perhaps, or conflict. "That's not for me to decide. But treason is one of the most serious charges there is." After Chen left, Martha sat at her kitchen table, the same spot where she had shared her meager dinner with John the night before. Treason. The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. The penalty for treason could be life imprisonment, or worse. She thought of John's tired eyes, the gentle way he had spoken about losing everything. He hadn't seemed like a traitor. But then, Martha had to admit, she had no idea what a traitor was supposed to look like. The night dragged on endlessly. Martha dozed fitfully in her armchair, unwilling to retreat to her bedroom while strangers swarmed her property. Shortly before dawn, she was startled awake by Agent Wilson. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, his voice betraying his exhaustion. "I need to ask you about your barn." Martha blinked, confused. "What about it?" "Our search teams went through it thoroughly yesterday, but one of our dogs keeps alerting to something in the hayloft." "Is there anything up there that might explain that?" Any food stored there, perhaps? Martha's mind flashed to the previous night. John sleeping in the hayloft, wrapped in old blankets. Just some old farm equipment, she said. And some blankets. I told the man he could sleep there to stay out of the rain. Wilson's eyes narrowed. We found the blankets. They've been sent for testing, but the dog is signaling something else. Something hidden. Martha's heart raced. Had John concealed something in her barn? Some piece of evidence that would confirm everything the FBI had told her? I have no idea what it could be, she said truthfully. That barn's been there since before I was born. There's decades of stuff accumulated up there. Wilson studied her for a moment, then nodded. We'll keep looking. Get some rest, Mrs. Sullivan. It's going to be another long day. But rest was impossible. As soon as Wilson left, Martha moved to the window, watching as more agents converged on her barn. Whatever they were looking for, she hoped they wouldn't find it. And not just because it might implicate John. She was beginning to worry about her own position. Would they believe she had no knowledge of whatever John might have hidden? Or would they see her as an accomplice? By mid-morning, the search had intensified. Agents had brought in specialized equipment and were systematically taking apart sections of the hayloft. Martha watched from her porch, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in her hands. Agent Chen approached, his expression grim. Mrs. Sullivan, we need to speak with you inside. Martha's stomach dropped, but she followed him back into her home. In the living room, Agent Wilson waited with a slender, elegant woman Martha hadn't seen before. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Special Agent Catherine Reynolds from Counterintelligence, Wilson introduced. She has some questions for you. Reynolds was perhaps 50, with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through Martha. Please sit down, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle despite her formidable appearance. Martha sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mrs. Sullivan, Reynolds began, I understand you've been cooperative thus far, and we appreciate that. But I need to be absolutely clear about something. Withholding information in this case could constitute obstruction of justice, or even aiding and abetting. Do you understand? Martha nodded, her throat dry. Good. Now I'm going to ask you again. What do you know about Jonathan Harker and why he came to your farm? Nothing beyond what I've already told your colleagues, Martha said, fighting to keep her voice steady. He came during the storm, said his car had broken down. I let him use the phone and offered him shelter in the barn because of the weather. And you had never met him before? Never. Did he mention anything about his work? Any references to classified information, foreign contacts, or sensitive material? Martha shook her head. He just said he'd lost his construction job and was looking for work. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Sullivan, we've been tracking Harker for 3 weeks. In that time, he's managed to evade some of our best agents. He's resourceful, intelligent, and extremely cautious. Do you really expect us to believe he randomly showed up at your isolated farm during a storm? I don't know what to tell you, Martha said, a hint of defiance creeping into her voice. That's what happened. Reynolds studied her for a long moment, then changed tactics. Tell me about your financial situation, Mrs. Sullivan. The question caught Martha off guard. My... what? Your financial situation. I understand the bank is foreclosing on your farm. That must be devastating, especially so soon after losing your husband. Martha felt a flash of anger. What does that have to do with anything? Desperation can make people do things they wouldn't normally consider, Reynolds said, like harboring a fugitive in exchange for money. I did not harbor anyone, Martha snapped, and I certainly wasn't paid to do so. Yes, I'm losing my farm. Yes, I'm broke. But I'm not a criminal. Before Reynolds could respond, the door burst open and an agent rushed in. We found something, he announced breathlessly. Wilson and Reynolds were immediately on their feet. What is it? Wilson demanded. Hidden compartment in the hayloft floor. There's a laptop and some kind of external drive. Martha felt the blood drain from her face. John had hidden something in her barn. He had used her. Reynolds turned back to Martha, her expression cold. "Perhaps you'd like to revise your statement now, Mrs. Sullivan." "I didn't know," Martha whispered. "I swear to you I had no idea." Wilson gestured to Chen. "Stay with her. Don't let her make any calls." As the others rushed out, Martha felt her world collapsing around her. She had trusted her instincts about John, and now it seemed they had betrayed her. The evidence was damning. He had hidden classified material on her property. But why? If he was planning to sell secrets, why leave them behind? Agent Chen sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Sullivan, for what it's worth, I believe you didn't know about the hidden laptop." Martha looked up, surprised. "You do?" Chen nodded slightly. "Your reaction just now, that was genuine shock. But that doesn't change the fact that Harker used your property to conceal evidence, and that puts you in a very difficult position." "What's going to happen now?" Martha asked, her voice small. "That depends on what's on that laptop, and whether we can find Harker." Hours passed in a haze of anxiety. Martha remained in her living room, effectively a prisoner in her own home as agents came and went. The laptop and drive had been taken to a secure location for analysis. Agent Reynolds had departed, but not before informing Martha that she would be required to come in for further questioning. As evening approached, Martha stood at her window, watching the activity outside. The agents were still searching, but with less urgency now that they had found what they were looking for. The immediate area around her farm had been thoroughly combed. If John was still nearby, he had found an exceptional hiding place. "Mrs. Sullivan," Agent Wilson appeared at her side. "We've arranged for you to stay with your sister in Omaha while the investigation continues. An agent will escort you there tomorrow morning." "Am I under arrest?" Martha asked, turning to face him. Wilson hesitated. "Not at this time, but you are a material witness in an ongoing investigation. We need to know you're available for questioning." Martha nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue. As Wilson turned to leave, a question that had been nagging at her finally found voice. "Agent Wilson, if Jonathan is such a threat, why haven't I seen his face on the news? Why haven't there been public warnings?" Wilson paused at the door. "This investigation is classified, Mrs. Sullivan. Public disclosure could compromise national security." He studied her for a moment. "Get some rest. You've got a long journey tomorrow." But as the door closed behind him, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that something about this situation didn't add up. If John was truly planning to sell state secrets, why had he been so careless as to leave evidence behind? And if the FBI had been tracking him for 3 weeks, how had he eluded them for so long only to end up at her farm? Something was missing from this puzzle. And Martha had a growing suspicion that finding that missing piece might be the only way to understand what had really happened and why her act of kindness had led to this nightmare. Martha couldn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and fears. By dawn, she had made a decision that surprised even herself. She wouldn't be going to Omaha. Not yet. Not until she understood what was really happening. She packed a small bag, just essentials, and slipped it under her bed. If she was going to act, it would have to be soon, before her FBI escort arrived. At breakfast, Agent Chen sat across from her at the kitchen table while she picked at a plate of eggs the agents had brought in. The FBI had taken over her kitchen, with agents coming and going, pouring coffee, and speaking in low voices about search perimeters and surveillance patterns. "You're quiet this morning," Chen observed. Martha shrugged. "Just thinking about what to pack. What I can take with me to Omaha." Chen nodded sympathetically. "It's only temporary, Mrs. Sullivan. Once we apprehend Harker and conclude the investigation, you can return home." Home. The word felt hollow now. In a month, this wouldn't be her home anymore. The bank would see to that. "Agent Chen," Martha said, keeping her voice low. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." The man who came here, John or Jonathan or whatever his real name is, he was hungry, exhausted. If he's such a high-level analyst with access to classified information, why was he living like a homeless man? Wouldn't he have resources? Money? Chen glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. His accounts were frozen when he disappeared, and he's smart enough to know we'd be tracking any card usage or large cash withdrawals. "But still," Martha pressed, "it doesn't make sense. If he had these valuable secrets to sell, why not just go directly to whoever he's selling them to? Why wander around like a vagrant for 3 weeks? A flicker of doubt crossed Chen's face. "I can't discuss the specifics of the case, Mrs. Sullivan." "No, of course not," Martha said quickly. "It's just hard to reconcile the man I met with the person you're describing." Chen studied her for a moment. "People aren't always what they seem, especially people like Harker." Before Martha could respond, Agent Wilson entered the kitchen. "Your escort will be here in an hour, Mrs. Sullivan. You should finish packing." Martha nodded and rose from the table. In her bedroom, she closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. It was now or never. She pulled the bag from under her bed and moved to the window. The agents had established a perimeter around the house, but they were primarily focused outward, looking for someone trying to approach, not someone trying to leave. The window in her bathroom opened onto a small side yard, partially concealed by an ancient lilac bush. If she could get through that window unnoticed, she might be able to reach the old equipment shed. From there, she could use the drainage ditch that ran behind the property, the same ditch she and Robert used to use as a shortcut to the Williams farm next door. Martha took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and made her move. 15 minutes later, she was crawling through the drainage ditch, mud soaking her jeans and coating her hands. She felt ridiculous, a 57-year-old widow playing at espionage, but also strangely exhilarated. For the first time since Robert's death, she was taking action rather than simply reacting to circumstances beyond her control. By the time she reached the Williams farm, her muscles were screaming in protest. The Williams had sold their property years ago to a corporate farming operation. The old farmhouse stood empty, used now only for storage, but Martha knew where the spare key was hidden. Inside, she caught her breath and tried to think. She had escaped the FBI's watchful eye, but now what? She had no car, no phone, and no real plan. What she did have was a growing conviction that John Reeves, or Jonathan Harker, was not the villain the FBI made him out to be. Martha rummaged through the storage boxes until she found some old clothes Tom Williams had left behind. She changed out of her mud-soaked attire into a pair of too large jeans and a faded flannel shirt, rolling up the sleeves and securing the pants with a piece of rope. It wasn't a great disguise, but it would have to do. Her next challenge was transportation. The farm equipment was gone, but in the back of a storage shed, she found an old bicycle. The tires were surprisingly still inflated, though the chain was rusty. It would have to do. As she pedaled down the back roads, avoiding the main highways where the FBI had established roadblocks, Martha tried to make sense of what she knew. John had come to her farm during the storm, hungry and exhausted. He had fixed her porch step and well pump. He had fled when the FBI arrived, and he had hidden a laptop and some kind of drive in her barn. Why hide it there? Why not take it with him? Unless he wanted it to be found. The thought hit Martha with such force that she nearly lost control of the bicycle. What if Jonathan, had hidden the laptop intentionally, knowing the FBI would find it? But that would mean... She shook her head. She was speculating wildly without enough information. She needed facts, and there was only one person who could provide them. But first, she needed to get to town without being spotted by the FBI. 3 hours later, Martha sat in a booth at the back of Millie's Diner in Wilson Creek, a small town about 15 miles from her farm. She had abandoned the bicycle 2 miles outside of town and walked the rest of the way, keeping her head down and her borrowed cap pulled low. The diner was busy with the lunch crowd, which worked in Martha's favor. She ordered coffee and a slice of pie, the cheapest items on the menu, conscious of the few dollars in her pocket. As she sipped her coffee, Martha scanned the faces around her, hoping against hope for a glimpse of John. Wilson Creek was the nearest town to her farm, the logical place for someone on foot to head, but it was also the most obvious place for the FBI to look. "Refill, hun." The waitress, a plump woman with a kind face, stood beside Martha's table with a coffee pot. "Please," Martha said, pushing her cup forward. "Actually, I was wondering, has anyone new come through town in the last day or so? I'm supposed to meet my cousin, but he's not the most reliable." The waitress pursed her lips. "Honey, this town's been crawling with FBI agents since yesterday. They're stopping everyone, checking IDs. Your cousin picked a bad time to visit." Martha's heart sank. "FBI? What's going on?" "They won't say exactly. Something about a fugitive. Got roadblocks on every road in and out of town." The waitress leaned closer. "Between you and me, they showed up at Sally's boarding house last night, searching every room." Poor Sally was beside herself. "Did they find anything?" Martha asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Not that I heard, but they're still here, so they must think their guy is nearby." The waitress straightened as the bell over the door jingled. "Speaking of which," Martha turned slightly, her blood running cold as Agents Wilson and Reynolds walked into the diner. They spoke briefly to the hostess, who gestured toward the back where the restrooms were located. Martha's mind raced. She couldn't go out the front without being seen. The back exit would lead to the alley, but the agents were heading that way. She was trapped. As Wilson and Reynolds disappeared down the hallway toward the restrooms, Martha made a split-second decision. She left money on the table for her coffee and pie, then slid out of the booth and walked calmly toward the kitchen. "Excuse me," she said to a startled cook as she pushed through the swinging doors. "Is there another way out?" The cook, a heavy-set man with a bushy mustache, blinked at her. "Lady, you can't be in here." "Please," Martha said urgently. "I just need to get out without going through the front or back entrance." The cook frowned, then jerked his thumb toward a side door. "Delivery entrance leads to the alley, but—" Martha was already moving. "Thank you," she called over her shoulder as she pushed through the door into the alley. She turned right, away from the back entrance of the diner, and hurried toward the street. Just as she reached the end of the alley, she heard Wilson's voice behind her. "Mrs. Sullivan." Martha broke into a run, her heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't sure where she was going, only that she needed to get away. She turned a corner, then another, weaving through the small downtown area of Wilson Creek. She glanced back to see Wilson and Reynolds in pursuit, Reynolds speaking urgently into a radio. Within minutes, other agents would be converging on her location. Ahead, Martha spotted a farmer's market set up in the town square. Crowds of people milled about, examining produce and crafts. Without hesitation, she plunged into the throng, winding her way through the stalls. She ducked behind a display of homemade quilts, struggling to catch her breath. Her legs trembled from the unaccustomed exertion, and a stitch burned in her side. She couldn't keep running. She needed a place to hide, to think. And then she saw him. Across the market, examining a stand of fresh vegetables, was John. He looked different. Clean-shaven, his hair neatly trimmed, wearing clothes that fit properly. But it was unmistakably him. Their eyes met across the crowded square. For a moment, neither moved. Then John's gaze shifted to something behind her and his expression hardened. Martha turned to see Agent Wilson scanning the crowd, his hand inside his jacket where his weapon was holstered. When she looked back, John was gone. But on the ground where he had been standing lay a folded piece of paper, a message for her. Martha's heart pounded as she watched Agent Wilson move through the crowd in her direction. She had seconds, not minutes, to decide. Crouching low, she scurried between market stalls, keeping her head down until she reached the spot where John had stood. The folded paper was still there, half hidden beneath a crate of apples. She snatched it up and continued moving, ducking behind a vendor selling homemade bread. The woman gave her a curious look but said nothing as Martha slipped the note into her pocket without reading it. There would be time for that later, if she managed to escape. The market emptied into a narrow side street lined with small shops. Martha entered the first one she came to, a dusty bookstore with towering shelves that created a maze of literary canyons, perfect for hiding. She wandered deep into the store, eventually finding a secluded corner in the history section. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the note. Church of St. Agnes, North Side entrance, 3 p.m. Come alone. Trust no one. Martha checked her watch. It was just after 1:30. She had time, but not much. St. Agnes was on the outskirts of town, at least a 30-minute walk, and she would need to be careful. The FBI was surely mobilizing every available agent to find her. The bell above the bookstore door jingled. Martha peered through a gap in the shelves to see Agent Reynolds enter, her keen eyes scanning the store. Martha's pulse quickened. She needed a distraction, something to get Reynolds looking in the wrong direction. Carefully, she pulled several large books from a shelf on the opposite side of the store and let them tumble to the floor with a resounding crash. As Reynolds hurried toward the noise, Martha slipped out from her hiding place and made for the rear of the store. She found a back door that opened onto an alleyway and darted outside, pulling the door shut behind her. The alley ran behind a row of shops, connecting to another street that led away from the town center. Martha hurried along it, expecting at any moment to hear shouts of pursuit. But the only sounds were the distant hum of the market and her own ragged breathing. She emerged onto a quiet residential street, lined with modest homes and well-tended gardens. Forcing herself to walk at a normal pace to avoid drawing attention, Martha began making her way toward St. Agnes. Her mind raced as she walked. What did John want? Why had he chosen the church? And most importantly, what was he really involved in that had the FBI so determined to find him? Martha realized with a start that she was doing exactly what John's note had instructed, coming alone, trusting no one. She had fled from federal agents, evaded a manhunt, all on the instinct that the hungry man who had sat at her table was not the traitor they claimed. Was she being hopelessly naive, or had she seen something in John that the FBI had missed? St. Agnes was a small stone church perched on a hill overlooking Wilson Creek. By the time Martha reached it, her legs were burning from the uphill climb, and sweat plastered her borrowed shirt to her back. The church appeared deserted, its parking lot empty, save for a single car that likely belonged to the caretaker. She circled around to the north side, where a small door was set into the stone wall, partially obscured by a trellis of climbing roses. Martha checked her watch again. 2:55 p.m. She was early. Taking a deep breath, she tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside was a narrow corridor that led to the nave of the church. The air was cool and smelled of incense and old wood. Martha moved cautiously forward, her footsteps echoing on the stone floor. The nave was empty, the afternoon sunlight filtering through stained glass windows and casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. Martha slid into the last row, her eyes darting from the altar to the confessionals to the side chapels. Where was John? "You came." The voice from behind made her jump. She turned to see John standing in the shadow of the choir loft stairs. He looked better than when she'd last seen him. Cleaner, less gaunt, but there was a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I almost didn't," Martha admitted. "The FBI seems pretty convinced you're a traitor." John moved to sit beside her, keeping a cautious distance. "And what do you think?" Martha studied him, trying to reconcile the desperate man who had gratefully accepted her last meal with the fugitive analyst the FBI was hunting. I think if you were really planning to sell state secrets, you wouldn't have left that laptop in my barn where it was bound to be found. A ghost of a smile touched John's lips. You're observant, more than the FBI gives you credit for. So if you're not a traitor, what are you? And why is the FBI so determined to find you? John's expression turned grim. That's complicated, and dangerous for you to know. I think we're well past that point, Martha said dryly. I've already harbored a fugitive, hidden evidence from federal agents, and evaded custody. Pretty sure I'm already in trouble. John sighed, running a hand through his neatly trimmed hair. You're right. You deserve the truth. He glanced around the empty church before continuing. I did work for Axiom Defense Technologies as a systems analyst. My job was to test the security of various defense systems, to find vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Martha nodded, encouraging him to continue. 6 months ago, I discovered something I wasn't supposed to find. A back door, a secret access point, built into a new missile defense system. John's voice dropped lower. It wasn't an oversight or a coding error. It was intentional, designed to allow unauthorized access to the system. You mean someone at Axiom deliberately compromised a defense system? Martha asked, struggling to grasp the implications. Not just someone. The CTO, Walter Klein. He's been selling access to foreign entities. I found evidence of payments through offshore accounts, communications with foreign agents, everything. Martha felt a chill run down her spine. So you went to the FBI? John laughed bitterly. I tried. I followed protocol, reported to my supervisor. The next day I was called into Klein's office. He knew what I'd found. He offered me money to keep quiet. A lot of money. When I refused, the threats started. What kind of threats? The kind you don't ignore. 2 days later, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but my computer had been accessed. The day after that, my girlfriend's car was run off the road. She was hospitalized with a concussion. The message was clear. Martha's heart ached for him. So you ran? John nodded. I took copies of everything I'd found. Communications, account information, the code for the back door itself. I went underground, trying to find someone I could trust. But Klein has connections everywhere. Law enforcement, intelligence agencies. He reported me as having stolen classified information, painted me as a traitor planning to sell secrets. That's why the FBI is after you. They think you're the criminal. Klein got to them first with his version of events, and he's very convincing. John leaned forward, his eyes intense. But there are good people in the FBI too, people who would listen if I could get to them. The problem is getting past Klein's people to reach them. The laptop in my barn, Martha said slowly. It contains the evidence against Klein. Some of it. Enough to raise serious questions about his activities. I wanted the FBI to find it, to see that there's another side to this story. So why are you still running? Why not turn yourself in now that they have the evidence? John's expression darkened. Because Klein has too much at stake to let the truth come out. The moment I'm in custody, I become a loose end. And loose ends have a way of being eliminated before they can talk. Martha absorbed this, her mind racing. So what's your plan? I need to get the rest of the evidence to someone who can't be influenced by Klein. Someone high enough in the intelligence community to act on it, but outside Klein's reach. John hesitated. I have a contact, someone I trust, but I need to reach them without Klein's people intercepting me. And how do I fit into this plan? Martha asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. John met her gaze directly. You're the only person who's shown me kindness without an agenda. The only one I think I can trust. I need your help, Mrs. Sullivan. I know it's asking a lot. Too much, probably. But I don't have anyone else. Martha was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks. If John was telling the truth, He was a whistleblower trying to expose a serious breach of national security. If he was lying, she would be aiding a traitor and digging herself into an even deeper hole. But something in John's eyes, the same weariness and integrity she'd glimpsed that stormy night, told her he was being honest. Before she could respond, the church door creaked open. Martha tensed, but John was already moving, pulling her down behind the pew. "Don't make a sound," he whispered, his body coiled with tension. Footsteps echoed through the nave, slow and deliberate. Martha's heart thundered in her chest. Had the FBI found them? Or was it someone far more dangerous? The footsteps drew closer, deliberate and unhurried. Martha held her breath, her shoulder pressed against John's as they crouched behind the pew. A shadow fell across the aisle. "It's safe to come out now," a woman's voice said softly. "I've secured the perimeter." John relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained wary. "Maggie?" A slender woman with cropped gray hair and sharp features appeared at the end of the pew. She wore the simple black dress and white collar of a minister, but her alert posture and scanning gaze suggested a different kind of training altogether. "You're cutting it close, Jonathan," she said, her tone a mixture of relief and exasperation. "The FBI has the entire town surrounded." John stood, helping Martha to her feet. "This is Martha Sullivan. She's the one who helped me." Maggie's assessing gaze shifted to Martha. "Reverend Margaret Wilson, though Reverend is just my cover at the moment." She extended a hand, which Martha shook hesitantly. "Thank you for helping Jonathan. There aren't many who would." "I didn't know what I was getting into," Martha admitted. "Few of us do," Maggie replied with a wry smile. She turned back to John. "We need to move. They've set up roadblocks on every major road, and they're conducting house-to-house searches. It won't be long before they check the church." "What about the evidence?" John asked. "My contact in the DOJ is standing by, but we need to get you there in person. Your testimony is crucial." Martha looked between them, confusion evident on her face. "I don't understand. Who are you? Who is your contact?" Maggie hesitated, glancing at John, who nodded. "I'm former CIA," she said. "Now I work with a group that protects whistleblowers, people like Jonathan, who expose corruption within the government or defense contractors." "The FBI said he stole classified information," Martha said, "that he's planning to sell it to foreign interests." "That's Walter Klein's narrative," Maggie replied. "And he has enough influence to make it stick, unless we can get Jonathan and his evidence to the right people." A sudden banging on the church's main doors made them all freeze. "FBI, open up!" Maggie's expression tightened. "Too late, they're here." She moved swiftly to a side altar and pressed something beneath it. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. "This way, quickly!" John grabbed Martha's hand. "Come with us." Martha hesitated. "I can't just disappear. My sister will worry. And I'm not a fugitive. At least I wasn't until today." "Mrs. Sullivan," Maggie said urgently, "the FBI will arrest you as an accomplice. And if Klein's people get to you, it will be much worse. They'll use you to get to Jonathan." Another bang on the door, louder this time. "FBI, we know you're in there." "Martha, please," John pleaded. "I never meant to put you in danger, but you're in it now. I promise I'll get you home safely when this is over." The sound of splintering wood echoed through the church as the main doors gave way. Martha made her decision. She ducked into the hidden passage, followed closely by John and Maggie, who sealed the entrance behind them. The passage was dimly lit by small emergency lights embedded in the floor. It sloped downward, leading deep beneath the church. The church was part of the Underground Railroad, Maggie explained as they hurried along. This passage connects to a network of tunnels that run beneath the town. During Prohibition, they were used by bootleggers. Now they're our escape route. Martha's mind reeled at the surreal turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been packing her belongings before the bank foreclosed on her farm. Now she was fleeing from the FBI through secret tunnels with a whistleblower and an ex-CIA agent. The passage opened into a larger underground chamber where several tunnels converged. Maggie led them to the rightmost tunnel, which sloped gently upward. "Where does this lead?" Martha asked, trying to orient herself. "To a garage about half a mile outside town," Maggie replied. "We have a vehicle waiting." They moved in tense silence for several minutes, the only sound their footsteps on the packed earth floor and their increasingly labored breathing as the tunnel continued its upward slope. Finally, they reached a metal ladder leading to a trapdoor. Maggie climbed up first, carefully pushing the door open and peering out before signaling that it was safe. They emerged into what appeared to be an abandoned mechanic's garage. Dust covered most surfaces, and old tools hung on the walls, but in the center of the room sat a nondescript gray sedan. "Your chariot awaits," Maggie said, tossing John a set of keys. "The trunk contains everything you'll need: clean clothes, food, water, and a secure phone. My contact will meet you at the safe house in Baltimore." John caught the keys but frowned. "You're not coming with us?" Maggie shook her head. "I need to stay behind. Create a distraction. Make them think you're still in the area while you put some miles between you and this town." She turned to Martha. "Take care of him. He's been through more than you know." Martha nodded, oddly touched by the woman's concern for John. "I will." Maggie moved to a shelf and retrieved a small backpack. "There's about $10,000 in cash in here, along with 2 clean IDs. Use them sparingly, only when absolutely necessary. And stick to the route we discussed, Jonathan. No improvising." John took the backpack, his expression solemn. "Thank you, Maggie, for everything. Just expose Klein and his operation. That's all the thanks I need." Maggie checked her watch. "Now go. You've got a long drive ahead of you." As John and Martha climbed into the car, Maggie raised the garage door. "I'll give you an hour's head start before I trigger the distraction. Make it count." With a final nod of farewell, John started the engine and pulled out onto a narrow dirt road that led away from town. Martha twisted in her seat to watch the garage recede in the distance, Maggie's solitary figure growing smaller until it disappeared altogether. "Will she be okay?" Martha asked. John's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Maggie can take care of herself. It's us I'm worried about." They drove in silence for several miles, following the dirt road until it connected with a 2-lane highway heading east. John kept checking the rearview mirror, his body tense with anticipation. "How did you know her?" Martha finally asked. "Maggie, I mean." John's expression softened slightly. "She was my handler when I first started working with Axiom. The CIA has interests in certain defense projects. When I discovered the back door in the missile defense system, she was the first person I contacted." "And she believed you?" "She's the one who helped me gather the evidence. But before we could take it to her superiors, Klein found out. That's when I had to disappear." He glanced at Martha. "I'm sorry for involving you in this. You've already lost so much." Martha looked out at the passing landscape, fields giving way to forests as they continued east. "The farm was already gone," she said quietly. "Maybe this is the universe's way of forcing me to move on." John's gaze lingered on her profile for a moment before returning to the road. "You're an extraordinary woman, Martha Sullivan." "I'm just stubborn," Martha replied with a small smile. "My husband always said it would get me into trouble someday." "Your husband sounds like a wise man." He was. Martha turned to face John fully. "So what happens now?" "We drive to Baltimore, meet this contact of Maggie's, and then what?" John's expression turned grim. "Then I present the evidence against Klein, testify to what I've seen, and hope it's enough to bring him down before he can silence us." "And if it's not enough?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswered. After a moment, John reached across the console and squeezed Martha's hand briefly. "One step at a time," he said. For now, let's focus on getting to Baltimore without being caught." Martha nodded, settling back in her seat. As the car ate up the miles, taking them farther from the only home she had known for decades, she found herself strangely calm. Perhaps it was the certainty of purpose that had been missing from her life since Robert's death. Or perhaps it was simply the knowledge that, for the first time in months, she wasn't alone. Whatever lay ahead, whether vindication or danger, she would face it. After all, what did she have to lose? Dusk settled over the highway as John and Martha continued their journey east. They had switched to back roads whenever possible, avoiding major highways and the surveillance cameras that came with them. The radio remained off. News of their escape would have spread by now, and neither wanted to hear their names broadcast across the airwaves. Martha stared out the window at the darkening landscape, farmland giving way to small towns, then more farmland. It reminded her of home, of the life she was leaving behind. The realization that she might never see her farm again hit her with unexpected force. "You okay?" John asked, glancing over at her. Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. After a moment, she cleared her throat. "Just thinking about my farm, all those years of memories. Robert and I built a life there." John's expression softened. "Tell me about him, your husband." The request surprised Martha, but she found herself wanting to talk about Robert. He was solid, the kind of man you could depend on no matter what. Not perfect by any means, stubborn as a mule and terrible with money, but kind, always kind. She smiled at a memory. "He used to bring me wildflowers every Sunday without fail, said it was to remind me that beauty grows even in the roughest soil. He sounds like a good man. The best." Martha brushed away an unexpected tear. "What about you? You mentioned a girlfriend, the one whose car was run off the road." John's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Lisa. We'd been together 3 years. She's a kindergarten teacher." His voice grew strained. "After the accident, I couldn't risk contacting her. For all I know, she thinks I've abandoned her. Or worse, that I'm a traitor." "I'm sorry," Martha said, understanding the pain of forced separation all too well. "Maybe when this is over." "Maybe," John agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Turnaround would take time. Trust doesn't heal as quickly as physical wounds." They lapsed into silence again, each lost in their own thoughts as the miles stretched behind them. Eventually, John pulled into a nondescript gas station on the outskirts of a small town. "We need fuel, and it's probably a good idea to switch license plates," he said, parking at the far end of the lot. "There's a change of clothes for both of us in the trunk. We should use them. The FBI will have descriptions of what we're wearing." Martha nodded, the reality of their situation sinking in deeper. They weren't just traveling to Baltimore. They were fugitives on the run. John popped the trunk and handed Martha a small duffel bag. "There's a restroom around the side. Change quickly, and try not to let anyone see your face clearly." Inside the restroom, Martha opened the bag to find jeans, a navy blue sweater, a denim jacket, and a baseball cap, all in her size. It was unsettling to realize that Maggie had prepared for her involvement, had known she would end up here before Martha herself did. She changed quickly, stuffing her borrowed clothes into the duffel. When she emerged, John was already at the pump, his back to the security camera. He had changed into dark jeans and a gray hoodie, with sunglasses despite the fading light. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable behind the glasses. "There's a diner across the street," he said. "We should get something to eat before continuing. Keep the cap low." The diner was half empty, populated by a few truckers and local residents. A tired-looking waitress led them to a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. Martha ordered coffee and a grilled cheese sandwich. John, a burger and fries. They ate in silence, both aware of the need to remain inconspicuous. When the waitress brought their check, John tensed suddenly. Martha followed his gaze to the small television mounted in the corner of the diner. The sound was muted, but the images were clear, their photos displayed on the screen, alongside the word, "Wanted." "Time to go," John said quietly, placing cash on the table. They left the diner and returned to the car, moving with deliberate casualness despite the anxiety churning beneath the surface. As John started the engine, Martha's gaze fell on a newspaper vending machine near the gas station entrance. The headline made her blood run cold. "Manhunt continues for traitor and accomplice." "John," she said, pointing. He followed her gaze and swore under his breath. "We need to get moving." They pulled out of the gas station, maintaining a careful adherence to the speed limit despite the urgency they both felt. As they rejoined the highway, Martha noticed John checking the rearview mirror more frequently. "Are we being followed?" she asked, resisting the urge to turn and look. "Not sure," John replied, his voice tense. "There's a blue sedan that's been maintaining the same distance for the last few miles." Martha's heart rate accelerated. "FBI? Maybe. Or Klein's people." John's expression hardened. "Either way, we need to lose them." He took the next exit abruptly, turning onto a narrow country road that wound through dense forest. The blue sedan followed. "Definitely being followed," John confirmed grimly. "Hang on." He accelerated, pushing the car faster along the twisting road. Martha gripped the door handle, her knuckles white as they took curves at alarming speeds. The headlights of the pursuing vehicle grew smaller in the distance as John's superior driving skill gave them an edge. Then, without warning, John cut the headlights and made a sharp turn onto an even narrower side road, little more than a dirt track. He drove in darkness for several hundred yards before pulling behind a dense stand of trees and cutting the engine. They sat in complete silence, barely breathing as the blue sedan raced past their hiding spot. After several minutes with no sign of the vehicle returning, John let out a breath. "That was close," he murmured, reaching beneath his seat and pulling out a small black case. Inside was a handgun. Martha's eyes widened. "You have a gun?" "Maggie thought we might need it." John checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. "I hoped we wouldn't." "Do you think they'll come back?" "Eventually, but we bought ourselves some time." He started the car again, keeping the headlights off as he carefully navigated back to a different road than the one they had left. "How did they find us?" Martha asked, the enormity of their situation sinking in further. "We were so careful." John's expression was grim. "Klein has resources beyond the FBI. Private contractors, mercenaries, people who operate outside normal channels." He glanced at her. "Are you okay? This isn't what you signed up for." Martha almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "I didn't sign up for any of this, but I'm here now and apparently I'm a wanted fugitive. So no, I'm not okay. But I'm still in." John's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Your husband was right about the stubbornness." "He usually was." Martha looked out at the darkened landscape rushing past. "How much further to Baltimore?" "About 3 hours if we can stay on main roads. Longer if we need to keep to back routes." John rubbed his eyes, fatigue evident in the gesture. "We should find somewhere to rest for a few hours. Neither of us has slept properly in days." "Is that safe?" "No," John admitted. "But driving exhausted isn't safe either. We'll find a small motel, pay cash, stay just long enough to recharge." An hour later, they pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel off a secondary highway. The neon vacancy sign flickered erratically, and only a few other cars were parked in the lot. John went in alone to get a room, returning with a key attached to a plastic fob marked 103. Their room was at the end of the building, offering a quick exit if needed. Inside, the room was clean but Spartan. 2 double beds, a small table with 2 chairs, and a bathroom that had seen better days. John immediately checked the windows and exits, while Martha sank onto one of the beds, her body suddenly reminding her of every ache and pain from the day's exertions. "You should rest," John said, drawing the curtains tight. "I'll take first watch." Martha wanted to protest that she wasn't tired, but the yawn that escaped her belied the claim. "Wake me in a few hours," she said instead. "You need sleep, too." John nodded, settling into a chair positioned to see both the door and window. Martha kicked off her shoes and lay down, not bothering to change or get under the covers. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of the exhaustion they had brought, she was asleep within minutes. She dreamed of Robert, standing in their sunlit kitchen, wildflowers in his hand. "You're doing the right thing, Marty," he said, his voice as clear as if he were really there. "You always had a good heart. That's why I loved you." Martha reached for him, but he was already fading, the kitchen dissolving around him. "Robert, wait." She woke with a start to find John shaking her gently, his expression urgent. "We have to go," he whispered. "Now." Martha was instantly alert, the urgency in John's voice clearing the fog of sleep from her mind. "What is it?" she whispered. 2 black SUVs just pulled into the parking lot. Men in tactical gear. John was already gathering their few belongings. "They're checking rooms. We have minutes, maybe less." Martha scrambled off the bed, shoving her feet into her shoes. "How did they find us?" "I don't know." John's expression was grim as he peered through a gap in the curtains. "The motel clerk must have recognized us from the news, or they've been tracking us some other way." A sharp knock sounded from the room next door, followed by muffled voices. They were getting closer. John moved to the bathroom window, a small opening barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. He pushed it open and looked out. "There's a drainage ditch behind the building. If we can reach it, we might be able to get to those woods beyond the highway." Martha nodded, adrenaline pushing aside her fatigue and fear. As John helped her through the window, she couldn't help but think of Robert. He would never believe his cautious, predictable wife was now climbing out of a motel bathroom window to escape federal agents. The drop to the ground was short, but jarring. Martha winced as pain shot through her ankles, but she forced herself to move, crouching low and following John toward the ditch. Behind them, the knock came at their motel room door. "FBI, open up!" They slid down into the drainage ditch, the bottom slick with mud that soaked through Martha's jeans. John pulled her along, staying low as they moved away from the motel. The sounds of the door being forced open echoed behind them, followed by shouts as their escape was discovered. "They're coming!" Martha gasped as flashlight beams began to sweep the area around the motel. "Keep moving," John urged. "We need to reach those trees." The ditch ran parallel to the highway, separated from it by a steep embankment. Ahead, Martha could see where it passed under the road through a large concrete culvert. Beyond that lay the dark mass of the forest. They reached the culvert just as shouts and the beam of flashlights indicated their pursuers had found the drainage ditch. John and Martha ducked into the culvert, the sound of rushing water echoing around them as they waded through ankle-deep runoff. "Down," John hissed, pulling Martha against the curved wall of the culvert as a vehicle rumbled overhead. Lights swept through the grates in the road above them, momentarily illuminating their hiding place before continuing on. They emerged on the other side and scrambled up the embankment toward the trees. Martha's lungs burned with exertion, her legs protesting after days of more physical activity than she'd experienced in years. But fear was a powerful motivator, pushing her forward when her body wanted to quit. The forest enveloped them in darkness, the dense canopy blocking out what little moonlight there was. They continued moving, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers, until John finally signaled for them to stop. "We need a plan," Martha panted, leaning against a tree trunk. "We can't keep running forever." John nodded, his own breathing labored. "We're about 40 miles from Baltimore. We need transportation." "Could Maggie help?" "Maybe, if we can contact her." John pulled out the secure phone Maggie had provided, but his expression fell as he examined it. It's been damaged, probably when we were climbing through the window or running through the culvert. Martha's heart sank. So we're on our own. For now. John put the useless phone away. But we're not without resources. We still have cash, and we're close to our destination. We just need to find a way to cover those last 40 miles without being caught. They rested for a few minutes, listening to the distant sounds of their pursuers searching the area around the motel. Eventually, those sounds faded, replaced by the normal nocturnal noises of the forest. They'll set up roadblocks, John said. Check buses, trains, rental cars. We need to find alternative transportation. What about hitchhiking? Martha suggested. People still do that, don't they? John shook his head. Too risky. Our faces are probably all over the news by now. We need to be more invisible than that. They began walking again, following the forest line parallel to the highway. After about an hour, they came upon a small rural road that intersected with the main highway. A quarter-mile down this road stood a modest farmhouse, a barn, and several outbuildings. Wait here, John said, studying the property from the cover of the trees. I'm going to check it out. Martha caught his arm. What are you planning? We need transportation. They might have a vehicle we can borrow. You mean steal? Martha's eyes widened. John, these are ordinary people. Farmers like me. We can't just take their car. John's expression softened. You're right. But we don't have many options left. He thought for a moment. What if we leave them money? Enough to replace whatever we take? Martha wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea, but she understood the desperate nature of their situation. Okay, but I'm coming with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than one. They approached the farm cautiously. The house was dark, everyone presumably asleep at this late hour. The barn door was partially open, and inside they found what they were looking for. An old pickup truck, at least 15 years old, but apparently in working condition. This is perfect, John whispered. Old enough that it probably doesn't have any modern tracking systems, but not so old that it will break down on us. Martha examined the truck with a knowledgeable eye. It's a farmer's work vehicle, reliable, practical, should get us to Baltimore if the tank is full. John checked the fuel gauge and nodded. Almost full. Now we just need the keys. Martha looked around the barn, her eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the windows. On a hook near the door hung several sets of keys. She pointed them out to John. Typical farmer, she said with a small smile. Robert always kept the keys to the tractor and truck in the barn, too. Easier than carrying them back and forth to the house. They found the right key after a few tries. Before getting into the truck, John counted out several $1,000s from the cash Maggie had given them and placed it on a workbench, along with a hastily scribbled note. Borrowing your truck for an emergency. This should cover the value and any inconvenience. Sorry. Martha stared at the money. That's more than this old truck is worth. It's not just for the truck, John replied. It's for the trust we're breaking, and for potentially bringing trouble to their doorstep. Martha nodded, understanding. They carefully pushed the truck out of the barn before starting it, not wanting the noise to wake the farm's occupants. Once on the road, John kept the headlights off until they were well away from the farm. As they rejoined the main highway, now in a vehicle different from the one being sought by authorities, Martha felt a small measure of hope. They had escaped twice now. Perhaps their luck would hold. We should reach Baltimore by morning, John said, checking the truck's clock. It was just after 3 a.m. Maggie's contact will meet us at 10 at the agreed location. And then what? Martha asked. What happens after you present your evidence? John's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Best case scenario? The Justice Department acts on it, Klein is arrested, and the back door in the defense system is closed. You and I are cleared of any wrongdoing. And worst case? A muscle twitched in John's jaw. Klein's influence prevails. The evidence is buried. And we become permanent fugitives. Or worse. Martha digested this in silence. She thought of her farm, of Robert's grave that she visited every Sunday, of her sister in Omaha who would be worried sick by now. All the anchors of her old life, potentially lost forever. "Do you regret it?" she asked finally. "Discovering the back door? Speaking up?" John was quiet for so long that Martha thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was soft but firm. "No. I couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed silent, knowing what I know. Some things are worth the risk." Martha nodded. Robert used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when things are easy, but the choices they make when things are hard. "Your husband was a wise man," John said, with a glance in her direction. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," Martha replied, surprised to find that she meant it. "He respected people who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost." As the truck ate up the miles toward Baltimore, the eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly. Dawn was still hours away, but Martha felt as though they were racing toward more than just a city. They were racing toward the truth, toward justice, and perhaps toward a new beginning. But first, they had to survive the final leg of their journey. And with both the FBI and Klein's mercenaries closing in, that was far from guaranteed. Baltimore emerged from the morning mist like a city from another world. Martha, who had spent most of her life in rural areas, found herself staring at the skyline with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The vastness of it, the anonymity it offered, was both comforting and terrifying. John navigated the borrowed pickup through the gradually increasing traffic, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for any sign of pursuit. They had switched license plates again at a rest stop an hour outside the city, a precaution that John insisted on despite their exhaustion. "Where are we meeting your contact?" Martha asked, watching the city grow larger through the windshield. "The National Aquarium," John replied. "Public place, lots of tourists, multiple exits. We're supposed to meet at the Australia exhibit at exactly 10 a.m. Martha checked the truck's clock. 8:37 a.m. "That gives us some time. We'll need it. We can't just drive up to the aquarium in a stolen truck. We'll park somewhere quiet, make our way there on foot, and scout the area first." They found a residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the Inner Harbor area. John parked the truck on a side street, tucking it between a delivery van and a compact car. "We should separate the cash," John said, opening the backpack Maggie had given them, "in case one of us is caught." Martha watched as he divided the remaining money, giving her half. The implication was clear. They might not both make it to the meeting. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the morning air. "There's a coffee shop across from the aquarium," John continued. "We'll stop there first, get something to eat, and watch the entrance. Make sure there's no obvious surveillance." They walked for nearly 40 minutes, keeping to side streets when possible. Despite the circumstances, Martha found herself appreciating the city's historic architecture, the glimpses of the harbor between buildings, the energy of a place so different from her quiet farm. The coffee shop was busy but not crowded, perfect for their needs. They found a table by the window with a clear view of the aquarium entrance, ordered coffee and breakfast sandwiches, and settled in to watch. "What does your contact look like?" Martha asked, her eyes scanning the people coming and going from the aquarium. "I don't know," John admitted. "Maggie arranged it. Said they would recognize me." Martha frowned. "That seems risky." "It's standard procedure. Minimizes the chance of exposure if one party is compromised." John sipped his coffee, his gaze never leaving the aquarium entrance. "The contact will approach us, not the other way around." As 9:30 approached, they paid their bill and made their way to the aquarium. John purchased 2 tickets, using cash and avoiding the security cameras as much as possible. Inside, they moved with the flow of visitors, 2 more tourists among many. The Australia exhibit was on the upper level, a winding display of habitats showcasing the unique wildlife of the continent. By 9:55, John and Martha had positioned themselves near a tank of brightly colored fish, their backs to the wall, with clear sight lines to both entrances of the exhibit. 5 minutes, John murmured, tension evident in every line of his body. Martha nodded, her own anxiety mounting. After everything they'd been through to get here, the moment of truth was finally approaching. Would the contact show up? Would the evidence be enough? Or had they risked everything for nothing? At precisely 10 a.m., a woman entered the exhibit. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair cut in a stylish bob, wearing a navy blue pantsuit that screamed, "Government official." She moved through the space with practiced casualness, stopping to admire displays while her sharp eyes scanned the room. When she spotted John, something flickered across her face. Recognition, certainly, but also something Martha couldn't quite identify. Relief? Surprise? The woman approached them, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. "The platypus is fascinating, isn't it?" she said, stopping beside them at a nearby display. Neither fish nor fowl, defying categorization. It was clearly a code phrase. John's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "I've always thought people are the same way, rarely fitting neatly into the boxes we create." The woman nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. "Jonathan Harker, and you must be Martha Sullivan. I'm Assistant Attorney General Caroline Foster. Maggie speaks highly of you both." Martha felt a surge of hope. An Assistant Attorney General was exactly the kind of high-level contact they needed, someone with the authority to act on John's evidence. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" John asked. Foster nodded. "Follow me. Not too closely. We can't be seen together until we're secure." She moved away, and they waited 30 seconds before following. Foster led them through the aquarium to a staff door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." She swiped a badge, and they entered a corridor that led to a small conference room. "We have 10 minutes, Foster said once the door was closed. "My security detail thinks I'm in the restroom. That will only hold for so long." John didn't waste time. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Foster. "Everything is here. Communications between Klein and foreign agents, the code for the back door, financial records showing payments to offshore accounts." Foster took the drive, her expression grave. "Maggie filled me in on the basics. If what you're claiming is true, this is one of the most significant breaches of national security in decades." "It's true," John insisted. "I wouldn't have risked everything if it wasn't." Foster studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you. But believing isn't enough. We need evidence that will stand up in court, evidence that Klein and his allies can't bury or discredit." "That's what's on the drive," John said, "along with my sworn testimony." Foster pocketed the flash drive. "What about the laptop you left at Mrs. Sullivan's farm?" Martha tensed. "The FBI has it, but John said it only contained part of the evidence." "A backup," John explained. "Insurance in case I was caught before I could deliver the complete package." Foster checked her watch. "My security detail will be looking for me soon. Here's what happens next. I'll take this directly to the Attorney General. If the evidence is as compelling as you claim, we'll move immediately to secure arrest warrants for Klein and anyone else involved." "And what about us?" Martha asked. "The FBI is hunting us across half the country." Foster's expression softened slightly. "That's complicated. Technically, you're both fugitives. But if Harker's evidence checks out, the charges against you will be dropped." "And until then," John pressed, "until then you need to stay hidden." Foster reached into her jacket and withdrew 2 key cards. "There's a safe house in Silver Spring. Address is on the cards. Go there, stay out of sight, and wait for my call. It shouldn't take more than 24 hours to verify the evidence and begin moving against Klein. Martha took one of the key cards, hope and doubt warring within her. After everything they'd been through, could it really be this simple? Just hand over the evidence and wait for justice to prevail? As if reading her thoughts, Foster added, "This isn't over yet. Klein has powerful allies, and they won't go down without a fight. The next 24 hours will be the most dangerous." John's expression hardened. "We've come this far. We'll see it through." Foster nodded, respect in her eyes. "I need to get back before my absence is noticed. Go to the safe house. Don't contact anyone. Don't use credit cards. Don't do anything that might leave a digital footprint. I'll reach out when it's safe." She moved to the door, then paused. "Maggie told me what you've both risked to bring this evidence forward. Whatever happens next, remember that you did the right thing. Not many would have had that courage." With that, she was gone, leaving John and Martha alone in the small conference room. "Do you trust her?" Martha asked after a moment. John considered the question. "Maggie trusted her enough to arrange this meeting. That's good enough for me." Martha nodded, though uncertainty still gnawed at her. "So we go to this safe house and just wait?" "It's our best option," John replied. "We've done our part. Now it's up to Foster and the Justice Department." They left the aquarium separately, taking different exits as a precaution, and met up again 2 blocks away. As they began the walk to find transportation to Silver Spring, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It had all been too easy. After days of narrow escapes and constant pursuit, handing over the evidence had felt almost anticlimactic. John seemed to sense her unease. "What is it?" "I don't know," Martha admitted. "Just a feeling, like we're missing something important." John's expression turned grim. "I've learned to trust those feelings. Let's be extra careful until we reach the safe house." They were so focused on watching for pursuers that neither of them noticed the black SUV parked across the street, or the man inside speaking urgently into a phone. Neither did they see the second man who emerged from the aquarium shortly after them, following at a careful distance. The final piece of their journey lay ahead, and with it, the most dangerous hours of all. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a modest building in Silver Spring. Martha stood by the window, peering through the blinds at the street below, while John checked the apartment for surveillance devices. They had taken a circuitous route to reach the address, switching transportation methods twice and doubling back several times to ensure they weren't followed. "All clear," John announced, putting away the small electronic device he'd been using to sweep the rooms. "No bugs, no cameras. Looks like Foster was straight with us." Martha nodded, though she couldn't shake her sense of unease. "So now we wait?" "Now we wait," John confirmed, sinking onto the couch. The adrenaline that had sustained them for days was ebbing, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion. "We should get some rest while we can. Take shifts sleeping." "I'll take first watch," Martha offered, noting the dark circles under John's eyes. "You look ready to collapse." John didn't argue, a testament to his fatigue. He stretched out on the couch, one arm thrown over his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into the rhythm of sleep. Martha settled into a chair by the window, keeping watch over both the street outside and the man who had turned her life upside down. In sleep, John looked younger, the lines of stress and vigilance smoothed away. It was hard to reconcile this vulnerable figure with the dangerous traitor the FBI was hunting. The hours crept by. Martha dozed intermittently, startling awake at every distant siren or car door slamming. By late afternoon, John was awake again, and they shared a simple meal from the supplies stocked in the apartment's kitchen. "Do you think Foster has taken the evidence to the Attorney General yet?" Martha asked as they ate. John checked his watch. "Probably. She said it would take about 24 hours to verify everything and begin moving against Klein. If all goes well, we should hear something by tomorrow morning." And if all doesn't go well? John met her gaze steadily. Then we may need to run again. Maybe leave the country. The stark reality of their situation settled over them once more. Martha thought of her farm, already lost to foreclosure, of Robert's grave, that she would never be able to visit again, of her sister who would never know what had become of her. The weight of potential loss was staggering. Evening brought a thunderstorm, rain lashing against the windows as lightning illuminated the darkening sky. Martha was reminded of that first night, when John had appeared on her doorstep, drenched and desperate. Had it really been only 4 days ago? It felt like a lifetime. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "After this is over, if it goes well." John looked up from the secure phone he'd been periodically checking for messages from Foster. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Clear my name, I suppose. Try to rebuild some kind of life." He paused. "What about you?" Martha sighed. "I don't know. The farm is gone. I have a sister in Omaha, but—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the sense that she could never go back to the life she'd had before. Too much had changed. She had changed. "You could start over," John suggested. "Somewhere new." "Maybe," Martha agreed, though the prospect was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. "I never thought I'd have to reinvent myself at my age." "It's never too late for a new beginning," John said softly. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. No one was supposed to know they were here except Foster, and she had said she would call first. John moved silently to the door, drawing the gun from beneath his jacket. Martha positioned herself behind the kitchen counter, heart pounding. "Who is it?" John called. "Special Agent David Chen, FBI," came the reply. "I need to speak with you and Mrs. Sullivan immediately." Martha's blood ran cold. How had Chen found them? And why was he alone? John kept the gun ready but hidden as he cautiously opened the door. Chen stood in the hallway, alone and unarmed, his hands visible at his sides. "May I come in?" he asked. "What I have to say shouldn't be discussed in the hallway." John stepped aside, allowing Chen to enter, but keeping himself between the agent and Martha. "How did you find us?" he demanded once the door was closed. "I followed Assistant Attorney General Foster from the aquarium," Chen admitted. "But I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to warn you." Martha moved out from behind the counter. "Warn us about what?" Chen's expression was grim. "Foster is compromised. She works for Klein." The statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. John's grip tightened on his gun. "Prove it." Chen reached slowly into his jacket, removing a small digital recorder. "This is a conversation between Foster and Klein from 3 hours ago, after your meeting at the aquarium." He pressed play. Foster's voice emerged from the device, clear and unmistakable. "I have the drive. Harker delivered it personally, just as you said he would." A male voice, presumably Klein, responded. "And the widow? Sullivan?" "With him. They're at the safe house in Silver Spring, exactly where you suggested we send them. They don't suspect a thing." "Good. My team will handle it from here. No loose ends this time." Chen stopped the recording. "They're coming for you. Tonight. To make sure neither of you ever testifies about what Harker discovered." Martha felt the floor tilt beneath her. "But why are you helping us? You've been hunting us from the beginning." Chen's face reflected internal conflict. "When we found the laptop in your barn, I was assigned to analyze its contents. What I found? It confirmed everything Harker has been claiming. The back door, Klein's communications with foreign entities, all of it. But when I reported this to Agent Wilson, he took the laptop and told me to forget what I'd seen." "Wilson is working with Klein too?" John asked, though he didn't sound surprised. Chen nodded. "A lot of people are. This goes higher and deeper than I ever imagined. When I realized what was happening, I decided I couldn't be part of it." So what now? Martha asked, the reality of their situation sinking in. If Foster has the evidence and she's working with Klein, we have nothing. Not nothing, Chen replied. I made a copy of the laptop's contents before Wilson took it, and I have my own evidence of Foster's corruption. It won't be enough to bring down Klein's entire network, but it's a start. John studied Chen, suspicion still evident in his posture. And we're supposed to trust you based on what? A recording that could easily be fabricated? You don't have to trust me, Chen said. But you do have to leave now. Klein's team will be here within the hour. As if to underscore his warning, Chen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening. They're mobilizing. We have maybe 30 minutes. John and Martha exchanged looks. The decision required no words. They had come too far to be caught now. Where do we go? Martha asked as John quickly gathered their few possessions. I have a contact in the U.S. Marshals Service, Chen replied. Someone I trust. She can get you into witness protection until we can build a case against Klein and his network. 20 minutes later, they were in Chen's personal car, driving through the storm-lashed night. Martha watched the city lights blur through the rain-streaked windows, her mind racing with the implications of everything Chen had revealed. Why did Maggie send us to Foster if she's working with Klein? She asked suddenly. She probably didn't know, John replied from the back seat. Klein's network is compartmentalized. Each person only knows their piece. Or Maggie could be compromised too, Chen added grimly. We won't know who to trust until we've unraveled the entire operation. They drove in tense silence for several miles before Chen spoke again. For what it's worth, I believe what you did was right, Harker. Exposing the back door. Refusing to be silenced. That's real patriotism. John nodded, acknowledging the statement without responding. Martha could see the weight of responsibility in his eyes. The burden of knowing his discovery had set all of this in motion. As they approached the rendezvous point where Chen's contact from the Marshal Service would meet them, Martha thought again of that stormy night on her farm. One simple act of kindness, feeding a hungry stranger her last meal, had altered the course of her life irrevocably. Yet despite everything, the fear, the danger, the loss, she couldn't bring herself to regret that decision. In helping John, she had found a purpose she'd thought died with Robert. She had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. The car pulled into an empty parking lot where a single vehicle waited, its headlights cutting through the rain. A woman stepped out, her face obscured by an umbrella. This is it, Chen said, stopping a short distance away. Marshal Kate Winters. She'll take you from here. New identities, new location, complete protection until we can bring Klein down. Martha turned to face him. Thank you, Agent Chen, for believing us, for risking your career, your life, to help us. Chen's expression softened. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. He looked at John in the rearview mirror. Take care of her, Harker. She's one of the good ones. John nodded, his hand finding Martha's and squeezing gently. I know. As they stepped out into the rain to meet their new future, Martha felt a strange sense of peace. The farm was gone, her old life left behind, but ahead lay possibility, and beside her walked a man who had chosen truth over safety, right over easy. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Two strangers brought together by a simple meal on a stormy night, now bound by a shared quest for justice and the hope of new beginnings. For Martha Sullivan, who had once thought her life was ending when she lost her farm, it was actually just beginning.